She doesn't open her own eyes. Someone else does that for her, in a manner of speaking. Long before the first light has settled over the Palatine Hill, a slave moves silently into the cubiculum and adjusts the wooden shutters. The room fills with a pale, gray wash of early morning, and the woman at the center of all this careful preparation simply breathes. This is Rome in the year 117 A.D., the final year of Emperor Trajan's reign. The empire has never been larger. Its wealth has never flowed more freely. And this woman, a matron of senatorial rank, wife of a man whose name is inscribed on the walls of the Forum, exists at the very apex of all of it. Her bedchamber is not large by modern standards, but it is dense with intention. The walls are painted in deep ochre and terracotta, with panels of greenish-blue framing scenes of gardens and birds. The floor beneath her feet, when she rises, is cold mosaic, tiny tesserae of white and black stone pressed into geometric patterns that would have taken months to lay. A small wooden table beside her bed holds a glass unguentarium, a narrow flask of perfumed oil, its contents amber in the early light. She sleeps in a tunica, a long, simple linen undergarment. But by the time she has sat up, at least 2 slaves are already in the room. This is not unusual. It is expected. Managing the household and preparing for the day is never a solitary act for a woman of her standing. There is always someone near, always someone watching, always someone waiting. And yet, watching her in these quiet early minutes, you might wonder, does she feel the weight of all those eyes? Or has she simply never known anything different? The real labor of the morning belongs to the ornatrix, a slave woman whose entire role within the household is devoted to her mistress's appearance. She arrives carrying a tray of small iron instruments, ceramic pots sealed with wax, and a polished bronze mirror no larger than a man's hand. The process begins with the skin. Pale, smooth skin is the mark of a woman who does not labor under the sun. To maintain it, the mistress has her face treated with preparations made from barley, egg whites, honey, and ground herbs, recipes that the poet Ovid himself once recorded. Some women of this class go further, using preparations containing white lead to brighten the complexion. The smell is faintly metallic, the texture cool and thick. Then comes the hair, and here, the full performance of status truly begins. Elaborate hairstyles in Rome's early 2nd century are architectural achievements. The ornatrix works with heated iron tongs, hairpins of bone and ivory, and pieces of false hair, wigs and hairpieces, sourced from slaves or imported at great expense from the Germanic provinces. Blonde hair captured from the north carries a particular prestige. The final construction rises in stacked curls and braids, pinned and wound into a shape that might take over an hour to complete. It signals, without a single word, exactly who this woman is and where she belongs in the hierarchy of the city. Over her linen tunica goes the stola, the long, sleeveless overdress of the Roman matron, reaching her ankles, belted beneath the bust. By 117 A.D., the stola is falling slightly out of everyday fashion, but for a woman of her rank and conservatism, it remains the proper garment of a wife of standing. Hers is made of fine wool, dyed a deep saffron yellow, with an embroidered border of purple and gold thread stitched along the hem. Around her neck, a collar of gold set with garnets. In her ears, heavy drop earrings of pearls, so heavy, in fact, that the role of the ornatrix sometimes includes treating the stretched and infected lobes of her mistress. On her wrists, gold bracelets. On several fingers, rings of carnelian and emerald. She is dressed not simply to be beautiful. She is dressed to be read. When she finally stands in the atrium of her domus and the morning light falls through the open compluvium above, that square aperture in the ceiling that lets in both sky and rain, she is, in effect, a statement about her husband's wealth, about her family's lineage, about Rome itself. The domus she moves through is a house designed to impress. It sits near the Palatine Hill, as befits a family of her rank, close to the imperial palace, close to power, close to the people who matter. From the street, the house reveals almost nothing. A plain facade, a few small windows set high in the wall, a doorway watched by a slave called the ostiarius. Rome's wealth, like its ambitions, faces inward. Inside, the atrium opens everything. Beneath the open ceiling, the rectangular impluvium pool catches whatever rain or light the sky offers. Today, the water is still and clear. On the walls around it hang painted portraits of ancestors, the imagines, faces rendered in encaustic wax on wooden panels, watching the household from across the years. Small shrines to the household gods, the lairs, stand in niches with offerings of oil and grain, refreshed that morning by a domestic slave before the family rose. On most days, the first hours after dressing belong to the salutatio, the morning ritual in which clients come to pay their respects to the patron of the household. In elite homes, this is primarily the domain of the husband, but this woman is present. She moves through the atrium with a measured pace, attending to the household's internal workings, while the formal greetings are exchanged in the tablinum. She oversees the slaves. She checks the supplies in the kitchen and storage rooms at the rear of the house. She gives instructions for the evening meal. The kitchen slaves are already at work. The cena, the main meal of the day, will be held tonight in the triclinium, and guests of importance are expected. The preparation is elaborate. The cook, himself a skilled and expensive slave, is managing a menu of multiple courses. A gustachio of hard-boiled eggs and olives preserved in brine, fish sourced from the markets near the Tiber, cuts of pork and roasted dormice seasoned with honey, bread baked in the kitchen's own oven, and fruit from the garden at the rear of the house. The smell of bread already fills the back corridor. Outside in the hortus, the small household garden, lavender and rosemary grow along a low wall. A fountain trickles against the far end. There is something almost peaceful about this garden. Almost. Because beneath all this order is a structure that never rests. The household runs on the labor of dozens of enslaved people who have no choice in any of it. The matron manages that labor. She gives orders and expects them to be followed. She is, in her own sphere, an authority. But she is also subject to authority herself, to her husband, to the legal structures of a society that classifies her, however wealthy, as perpetually under male guardianship. She knows this. She has always known this. She manages it the way she manages everything, with composure and with skill. In the early afternoon, the household enters a slower rhythm. The midday heat is pressing in from outside. Rome in summer can be almost unbearable, the smell of the streets rising sharply through the narrow lanes between the insulae. The wealthy have the luxury of retreating from it. The poor do not. The matron rests briefly in her cubiculum, as is the custom during the meridiatio, the midday rest observed across all classes of Roman society. When she rises again, it is time for the baths. She does not go alone. She never goes alone anywhere. A small retinue of slaves accompanies her, one carrying a clean strigil and fresh towels of linen, another holding a box containing her personal oil flask and cosmetic tools, a third whose role is simply to watch over her belongings in the changing room. The baths of Trajan, newly completed just a few years earlier, vast and magnificent, receive her and her companions into corridors of heated marble and painted plaster. Women bathe separately from men at designated hours. The rooms she passes through follow the established sequence: the apoditerium, where she undresses; the tepidarium, a warm room where the body adjusts; the caldarium, thick with steam and heat, where she moves slowly through the rituals of scraping and oiling, using the curved iron strigil to clean the skin without soap; and then the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool that closes the circuit, sharp and clarifying. But the baths are never just about washing. They are one of the very few places where a woman of her class can move with some degree of social freedom. Other women of standing are here. Conversations happen. Alliances are maintained or quietly damaged. Information passes. A woman who appears at the baths frequently and is well dressed and composed upon arrival announces, by her very presence, that her household is flourishing. She listens as much as she speaks. Back at the domus, as the afternoon cools toward evening, she turns her attention to the final preparations for the cena. Guests arrive near the 5th or 6th hour after noon, the equivalent of late afternoon, and are received in the atrium before being shown to the triclinium. The dining room is prepared with care. The 3 broad couches arranged in their U shape around the central low table, covered in cushions of dyed wool. Portable tables carry the food course by course, brought in by trained household slaves. The walls of the triclinium are painted with images of Dionysus and abundant fruit, visual expressions of abundance, of pleasure well ordered. The matron reclines on the couch beside her husband. She is present at the dinner table as an equal social actor, a fact that would have surprised observers from other cultures, where women dine separately or not at all in the company of men. She participates in conversation. She is expected to be witty, composed, and knowledgeable. She is also, simultaneously, a demonstration of her husband's taste and prosperity. Every detail of her appearance, her jewels, her manner of speech, the quality of her reclining posture, all of it is visible and legible to everyone in the room. How different the performance of being a woman was, depending on the century one was born into, and yet somehow the performance never fully stops. It would be easy to look at this woman's life and see only luxury, the marble floors, the gold earrings, the household staff, the banquets. And it is true that she lives in material comfort that most of her contemporaries could not imagine. But there is something worth sitting with more carefully. For all her wealth, for all the respect her rank commands, she has no legal standing to act without a male guardian. She cannot vote, she cannot hold public office, she cannot own property fully in her own name, without navigating legal arrangements designed to keep male authority intact. Her identity in the public record of Rome is filtered almost entirely through the men she is connected to, her father, her husband, her sons. What she has is domestic power and social influence, and the quiet authority that comes from managing an empire in miniature. These are real forms of power. But they are also circumscribed in ways that the law never bothered to apologize for. And yet women like her did find ways to act. We know from the letters of Pliny the Younger, written in exactly this period, that wealthy Roman women managed estates, ran businesses, supported philosophers, built temples, and left fortunes. Umidia Quadratilla, a Roman woman of enormous wealth who died in precisely this era, kept a troupe of pantomime actors, funded public games, and directed the inheritance of her own estate down to its smallest detail. She shaped her world within the limits she was given. That tension between the formal constraints of the law and the practical reality of a woman's influence is not unique to Rome. It runs through nearly every century that follows. The specific forms change. The architecture of control shifts. But the fundamental negotiation between what women are permitted and what they actually do has a continuity that is striking once you begin to notice it. The mosaic floors of the domus on Palatine Hill are long since buried. The atrium is rubble beneath later centuries of building. The names of most of these women were never recorded in the monuments that survived, but the patterns they lived inside, the performance of appearance, the management of household, the careful navigation of power without full legal access to it, the way a woman's day is shaped as much by expectation as by choice. Those patterns echo forward in ways that are sometimes startling. She lived nearly 2,000 years ago. She dressed before a bronze mirror in a lamp-lit room. She arranged flowers from her garden for the lararium. She supervised the cooking of a meal she would not eat alone. She bathed in marble rooms while carrying on conversations that mattered. She reclined at a dinner table and was, in the same breath, a person and a symbol. What she knew and what she was never permitted to say out loud may be the most interesting thing about her of all. Do you have any suggestions for the next video? You can comment on it. I'll be happy to bring it.